gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy. Remarkable?
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking marketing lessons from the Gilded Age. With the help of special guest, Chief Marketing Officer at Auctane, Laura Goldberg. Laura, how are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm so excited to have you on the show. You have worked at some crazy places, little Napster, little NFL, LegalZoom, Cabbage, Constant Contact. You ever heard of those? You know, a famous marketer in her own right. And now you're talking Gilded Age. Why the heck did you pick the Gilded Age to talk about today?
So I picked it because I'm very late to it. I remember when it first debuted, watching that first episode and being like, meh. And the buzz was like, this stinks. It's not Downton Abbey. And I was out. This is going to be a long story. And then I was on an airplane. I forgot to download content. So I was paging through the seat back and I saw it and I started to watch it. I was like, oh, this isn't so bad at all. Why did I not watch this? And I noticed that I was watching season 2, episode 1. And I was like, maybe this got better. And so I went back and I started it right from the beginning. And I have to say, I became obsessed. And I started asking people, are you watching this? Do you watch this? Does anybody watch this show? And then very slowly, I kept seeing it on my social media and I saw the actors everywhere. And then it was like, what's going to happen this week? And I just think it's an amazing example of I love a slow burn, right? It's a slow burn. And you think about in this day and age, I'm shocked it didn't get canned right after the first year and it got bad reviews and it was, I don't think that watched, I don't know, but I just love it. It's not an underdog story, right? It's famous people doing famous things and big budget, but it was panned and now it's like, seems like a phenomenon.
I mean, 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. So
exactly.
It's a phenomenon, I would say, is definitely true. We're going to get all into the Gilded Age. But first, you're the CMO of Auctane. Tell us about that.
So Auctane is a shipping and logistics company. We operate under much more well-known brands like ShipStation and Stamps.com in the US, and a couple brands, Metapack, ShipStation again, and PackLink in Europe and in Australia. And essentially, we provide small, medium, enterprise, and everything in between businesses their shipping and logistics software. So you need to get your customer's order from point A to point B. We're the software for you. And so I'm the CMO there. I've been there for a little over a year. And, you know, I would say ultimately my job is to acquire customers and make sure they stick around, right? But we do that through all of the fun things that marketing entails, which is building our brand, telling customer stories, growth marketing, customer lifecycle marketing. But like I said, it's all at the end of the day in service of servicing our customers with what they need.
Is Stamps.com single-handedly responsible for the podcast revolution starting?
So I'm going to shout out one of my old employers with that. I would say Stamps.com and LegalZoom, right? We're two of the pioneers in podcasting. And it's funny, I've looked back at some of the old contracts that we had when there were 10 podcasters. LegalZoom, when I was there, it was podcasting, it was drive time radio. Like you think about some of the podcasts now, they used to have radio shows, right? My daughter was telling me about this great podcast, This American Life. I'm like, that's a radio show. This happens to be a podcast now. But, and it's amazing. The two were pioneers in the space. And it's super cool to have managed audio when it was just podcasting and FM radio. I remember the Dan Patrick Show, big radio show, if you like sports radio. And now it's amazing, right? We podcast, Spotify, we still buy ads on Pandora, Sirius XM, regular radio as well. But yes, Stamps.com, LegalZoom, pioneers in the podcast advertising world.
Well, it's so cool because I know for a fact that the only reason why I know Stamps.com is because I heard it on podcasts, like for a fact. And the fact that like when I saw that you worked there, and I was like, literally nostalgic. I'm like, I was hearing those ads a decade ago or more, more. Like way more actually. Like I was like sitting in Afghanistan listening to Bill Simmons podcast, hearing Stamps.com ads. Like it's just crazy. Yeah, I mean, we end up talking about this a lot on the show, that like the thing that's interesting about advertising is that like the audience is in on it, right? So if you can make really good ads, like the audience knows they're being sold to, and they kind of like the fact that it's a good ad, right? That's why we like the Super Bowl ads, right? Yeah. Can you sell me something and make it interesting, right? Like there's this sort of thing. Whereas, anyway, so people enjoy it, right? Like they don't like ads, but like they do like good ads.
And I think, and it's still true a little bit on the podcast, like it feels like it's for you, right? You're listening
for sure
to a story or about a subject that you really like, and then particularly, when you have a host-read ad, when you read an ad, it's like, oh, he's talking to me, right? And it's such a more intimate experience than a lot of certainly digital ads, right? Which no matter how much you can customize, just feel flat, right? I feel like podcasting in particular and the podcast hosts really made ads come alive in a way that you don't see in any other medium.
Yeah. And I mean, early days of like Adam Carolla, he used to say like, put some wind in the sails of the pirate ship. Like I'm, implying like, if you go click on this link, like you're helping us fund the podcast.
Yes.
And I think that sentiment is even more true today than it was back then, right? Where so many people are independent now.
Absolutely. You're totally throwing me back, Adam Carolla. When I was at LegalZoom, we went to his studio. What's that from? It was one of the late night shows, was like from something in Burbank. He had like this dusty old warehouse in Burbank.
Yeah, I remember years ago, I was talking to the guy that did his ads, and he was like, we were talking about, an potential advertising with them. He was like, hey, whatever it is we got to do, we get it done, and everybody's happy, and Adam buys another car, like that's hilarious. But how personal is that? How cool is that, right? You compare that to like spending money on like meta ads, right?
Yeah, 100%. Look, it all serves a purpose. It's just one is less fun for you, the person who's buying and making the ads. But it all, I do like to say, we advertise everywhere, right? Not one medium does not fit them all. So even when you saw LegalZoom or Stamps.com way back in the day on podcasting, right? We were still, way back, not on Meta because it didn't exist yet, but still, right? Still buying AdWords, still doing prospecting with like Google ad networks, still both Stamps and LegalZoom, right? A lot of direct response TV. So it all feeds in. So it's like, oh, I heard Ian read that ad to me about Stamps, but then I need the solution. Oh, here it is. So I have a good feeling, right? So it all ties in and works together if you're doing it right.
Yeah, the CMO Ricardo Chandar, who's an advisor, a great friend, he used to say, Koopa, paint the sky Koopa blue. And I always think about that. It's like, you just want wherever your target audience to look, you want them to see you. And I love that. Meredith, what the heck is the Gilded Age?
Well, Ian, Gilded Age is not Downton Abbey. So if you're expecting Downton Abbey, right, you'll be disappointed, but not entirely. And that's, to Laura's point, but it is created by the same person, Julian Fellowes. The idea came from him just basically being interested in that period of time, the Gilded Age.
New York is a collection of villages. The old have been in charge since before the Revolution, until the new people invaded.
Which was like just after the Civil War from about 1870s to 1900. And it was just this time of like insane economic growth, industrialization, and also like a huge gap between the very rich and the poor.
You must meet the right people in the right way.
Money isn't everything, Agnes.
And the term actually comes from this book by the same name, The Gilded Age, by Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner. And it refers to the sort of like surface level wealth and prosperity. And underneath there's like corruption and sort of this darkness. And gilding is like covering something in gold leaf. And one of the reasons why you do that is to make something look nicer. So it's sort of like this thin layer of niceness with just like corruption underneath. So Fellowes, when he was talking about coming up with this idea, he said, long before I thought it was going to be on television, I was reading about Alva Vanderbilt, J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, Jay Gould, and all these people. And I got interested in this extraordinary technicolor world that followed the Civil War, when in a way, America established being American as a different way of life from any other country on the planet. They were limbering up for the century they would dominate, the 20th century. It was a very invigorating society. These people could arrive in New York and crash in, build their palaces and all the rest of it. In London, Paris, and Rome, there was no blending of the old and the new. The new were expected to wait a couple of generations. If you had potential in the Gilded Age, in America, there was an opportunity to express your potential and make it take you somewhere. So he was super inspired by this time period, but the series took like 10 years to even get started.
I'm afraid New York can be quite challenging at first.
We haven't found it so, have we, George?
There is no challenge you are not equal to, my dear.
So they had tons of obstacles to jump over, right? The project was initially announced in 2012, but they faced, right, all of these obstacles. It was supposed to be aired on NBC, but switched networks to HBO, so that caused a pause. It was also hard to get off the ground because of the high production costs. The sets, costumes, historical detail, like everything is so particular, and that's expensive just to get right? And then they were supposed to start filming in March of 2020. And of course, we all know what happened then. So literally 5 days before they were set to start filming, they had to shut everything down. And Julian Fellowes said that he thought COVID could be the death knell for the project. So he really felt this was not going to go forward. But eventually it did. He kept persevering, which I feel like we see often with these amazing pieces of content, is like, there's this idea, this like key idea. You have one person being like, this needs to be made, and just keep pushing for it.
I was just going to say, yeah, my favorite quote is that there's only one job in Hollywood: find a script and fight like hell to get it made.
Yeah, seriously. That's definitely what this is. And I feel like one of the things too that's interesting about Julian Fellowes is it took him until he was like 50 to get his career started. So it was definitely something that he was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be a scriptwriter or a storyteller. But when it happened, and it happened big for him. But there are a few key things that I feel like he does really beautifully. He creates this like whole ecosystem of like entangled relationships. So you have families, their servants, their friends, romantic relationships, like this whole network of connections. And it's this real like world building with this richness and depth that I find very beautiful.
George Russell is a power in the land. Before long, he'll put money into his pocket with every train ticket you buy. I think we should know the Russell family.
We do not move in the same circles.
Mama, you are incorrigible.
I take that as the highest praise.
And then like, we mentioned the rich historical context and this like attention to detail with this like voluptuous costuming. Like I love the textures and the eye for detail and all of this. And one thing that I thought was interesting was he initially wrote the script to tell the true story of the Vanderbilts, William Kissam Vanderbilt and Alva Vanderbilt, who are known for managing the railroad system in Eastern US. But he found that to be too constraining on the storytelling. So he decided to make it more like loosely based on their story instead, to give him more freedom to tell the story he wanted to tell.
You
bastard.
I may be a bastard, Mr. Thorburn, but you are a fool. And of the two, I think I know which I prefer.
But there's so many and Laura, I don't know if you felt this, but there's so many things where I'm like, did this actually happen? Because a lot of it is true. Did you find that as well?
100%. And one of the things I'm obsessed with was the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and Carnegie. Full disclosure, I went to Carnegie Mellon and they teach you how to pronounce it that way. So I was also obsessed with it because I knew that story the Andrew Carnegie story. Those guys were new money. They were not the in crowd. They were richer than anyone by this point, but they weren't the cool kids, right? They were totally the outsiders. And, just from where you sit now, and I lived in New York for a long time, and everything is Vanderbilt and Rockefeller and whatever. And you think, oh, those are the names that have been here forever. No, they were, and I love that old new, if you weren't here with the pre-pilgrims or whomever, and you didn't come from England and you don't practice the English ways and you haven't been here since 16, whatever, you're no one. You just made your money yesterday. And of course you can't come to our opera. And of course you can't marry into our family. And it's fascinating, 200 years ago that the social class was so different. But Meredith, I do exactly what you say. I love historical fiction and I Google all the time, did this actually happen? Who is this? And the whole, Meredith and I are just going to talk about the show for now. But when Gladys got married is when I learned about the Vanderbilt and the Vanderbilts marrying their child to a duke. And because I was obsessed with her wedding dress. Her wedding dress on the show was exquisite. And I read this whole article, I think it was in Women's Wear Daily or something, with the costume designer who found photographs of the old dress and tried to recreate the old dress. And
wow,
it's just very layered, whether intentionally or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are other details too. I want to talk about it so bad, but I don't want to give it away too, because it is a new season, right? Yeah. I was just did this actually happen to William Kisson Vanderbilt? Oh. You probably know what I'm referring to. But yeah, there's so much beautiful detail. And yeah, like you mentioned, there's this huge play with class. And one of the things that I love too in this, Laura, and you probably feel the same, is there are also major changes of fortune that happen that totally stir the pot.
You are the future, Mrs. Russell. And if you are the future, then they must be the past.
Well, things move faster nowadays.
And I always think that's really interesting when the dynamic totally shifts abruptly, something terrible happens or something amazing happens. And it just all of a sudden someone is rich who was a servant before, or all of a sudden the person who had the money in the family lost it. And then it's, another member of the family comes into it. Absolutely changes. So I love that as well. But to share, I guess I haven't really talked about what the show is totally about yet, but we mentioned, right, the show is set in the 1880s, New York City, and it tells a story of the old money, wealthy folks living there, and then one specific family who are considered new money, trying to sort of break through. And I know, Laura, you mentioned watching season 1 and being let down by it. And I was trying to figure out why I sort of felt the same way too, which is having watched Downton Abbey, it's so lush with British accents and everything. And then watching Gilded Age, it felt a little bit stiff with these historical American accents, New York accents. And it the language is just different, right? And so to me, it was what it was missing was British accents. But I was wondering what you think, why season 1 fell flat.
I've been thinking about it. And part of it is I think of Cynthia Nixon and Christine Baranski as Sex in the City and The Good Wife, The Good Fight, or
That's so true, yeah.
Right? And then they're sitting there in these elaborate 1880s dresses in their brownstone on 61st Street and Park Avenue. And it's you're both lawyers And there was something about the two of them. I will say too, and I think it's a really interesting thing just in storytelling in general. It's a bit of a slow burn, right? There's a million characters. You see these two people who you know from other places kind of talking in a very formal way. And, their niece comes and you don't know why, and you don't know why these sisters live together. There's a lot. And it's interesting in retrospect. I actually like when there's a slow burn and it's not like one episode of complete backstory so we can get into it. But it was a bit odd. I didn't think about the British accents, but I know part of it was like, hey, these two people don't belong in those chairs. And now I can't think of them in any other way. But I think that was part of it as well. Look, I also just don't think the first season was as good. And so, but it's what I love about it from like a story. It's like, hey, they tried it. It clearly was good enough to get renewed, or Julian Fellows is respect enough to get renewed. And then it's like, you always talk in marketing about testing and learning. And it's like, and then it got better and they added a new character, they improved the storyline, or this person got more comfortable, or whatever it was. And it built, which I think is super cool.
So cool. I totally agree.
I think all those other things earn you the right for someone to keep paying attention, right? It's like sort of we're talking recently on this show about sort of how if you have a really high concept, great story, that like everything else doesn't need to be as perfect. Like the cast doesn't need to be perfect. The sets don't need to be as perfect. Like everything doesn't need to be as perfect if like you can do that. Well, if the alternate is true, everything probably does have to be perfect.
Right.
Like your cast actually does have to have Carrie Coon and, and Baranski and all these people. Like if the sets do need to be on point, everything, does need to be ratcheted up because, a perfect story doesn't necessarily win the day or won't, isn't there to win the day. And so, I wonder perhaps if, suffering from that a little bit. Yeah. The accent thing is also really interesting. Because as Americans, we love British television, much like the way other people in the world really like American television, right? They like to see, surfers and, whatever else. But it got me thinking about like the transatlantic accent. And I wonder, which is made up, right? Which we should do a whole episode just on that, which is a made up language, which is insane. When you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, we just made this up. But I wonder if that's maybe part of the reason why they did that in the 30s and 40s and 50s is to give it a signature that is just unique and different. Yeah, it just made me think of that.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, and just crazy that they just made up a fake language or fake accent.
Yeah.
That just didn't exist.
Right. And I think to be, I don't know if better is the right word, different, stand out, whatever it is they were trying to accomplish, or the best part of that. I don't know.
But that's the thing, right? Different is the differentiator, right?
Right.
Yeah. Wait, sorry, did you watch Downton Abbey?
Oh, yeah. I watched Downton Abbey, all the movies. There's a new movie coming out. Oh, yeah. But that was, to me, exactly the opposite, which is obsessed at the beginning. And then after a while, I was like, okay, this should probably end. It's, I don't want to say it became less interesting because it was always sort of interesting, but that was like, got you out of the gate. But I do think between the actors and other than Maggie Smith, like not really knowing, except for the American, right? Not really knowing the actors. I knew Hugh Bonneville. I actually watch a lot of British television, so a lot of those people were very familiar. But in British television, I'm like, oh, they were in one of those masterpiece somethings I watched or whatever.
Well, and they're like the 15th character in that because and all British actors are like, you can be the most famous actor in England, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll be the butler that says 4 lines. You're like, what?
Exactly.
It's so weird. And the reason why I was asking is so you talked about how you like historical fiction. So this is definitely in your wheelhouse, but you also specifically like British television. So this is also inherently not in your wheelhouse in that way, which is maybe why you passed on it originally. And then you ended up coming back to it, which is fascinating. And I love how you watched season 2, episode 1, and you're like, this is great. And then you go back and watch it.
Maybe it's how we should watch all television, right? If that second season, episode 1 gets you, then you go back and watch the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, right? I mean, I think a lot of shows have either one of those two problems, which is like how you can't replicate the magic in the first season, or in the second season, the show you got to get them through the first season. And yeah, and the team just didn't. And like, there's so many shows. I mean, I don't know if you are an Always Sunny fan, but it's really interesting hearing them when they did their podcast. We're like, oh, we didn't even find our footing until like season 3, because we had this new director and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, yeah, there's just so many shows like that where like, we didn't really get this. Parks and Rec is the same way where they didn't really get the characters right.
Oh, yeah.
I think it happens a lot with comedies though, because like you have to, it's like we're such like amateur TV analysis now. But with comedy, like you still have to deliver the jokes, right? And so I think it's hard to like build up story but still make sure you're making people laugh at the same time. But it is true, like having gone back and watched Parks and Rec, that first season's like, they don't have their footing exactly, like where everyone fits and where the jokes fit in and stuff like that. And then it's just brilliant from there on out.
Well, yeah, it's like if you watch one episode of Seinfeld and Kramer, flies in the door, you'd be like, that's not funny.
Right.
And then you watch it the 50th time and you're like, oh, this is hilarious because this is who he is, right? Yeah, so back to the Gilded Age for a second. I think that when you do a period piece, that you just earn the right for people to pay attention for longer because they understand the craft that went into it. I feel like if like you would give a period piece such a longer leash than you would give a modern day, because you're like, somebody had to go and do all this crap.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, we know, like, there is a tacit agreement for the audience where it's like, they had to build an entire set of like an old Western mining town. Like, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yes. But you know what I will say, which is ultimately, right? And I think it's kind of the important, what can you take from it? You have to deliver the goods ultimately, right?
Always,
so maybe it gets you
yeah.
from 1 to 2, right? Or it gets you the next whatever episodes. And they definitely did, right? Like the story is now gripping. Not that I still don't care about the costumes but you see the houses are the same, right? From season to season, though they are building their house in the first season. But they really ended up nailing the story, which is ultimately captivating. And it's like, I was trying to think, look, much like Downton Abbey, it's ultimately a soap opera, right? But it's a one based in, steeped in history and real facts in the age. And then 2, even the characters you don't like, you like, right? Like, one of the characters gets kind of ostracized from society, and I felt badly for him. I don't know why. He deserved it, but it's like, oh, that's too bad. He deserves it, but that's too bad. And I'm sad he's not going to be on the show anymore. Maybe, well, everyone does seem to have a comeback here, but ultimately, it's like, it's a little bit like you can start slow, but you can't let up, right? You got to get it right eventually, or you are dead in the water. You gotta tell a compelling story, and towards the end, and you can really, I think the talk of the show started with the costumes and the houses and who is this and whatever, and then it's like, will they or won't they, and are they going to get divorced or married, or what's going to happen, right? So ultimately, it always goes back to, does it deliver the compelling story, which is essentially the product with television?
B2B marketing takeaways from the Gilded Age. Laura, what do you got for us?
I would say there are three. One, and particularly with B2B marketing, you got to have patience, right? You got to see it more than once. It has to build. You may not be what are those thingies called? A labubu out of the gate. But I was like, what's something that's really hot? It's going to build. Nobody makes a decision. And I would say, actually, no one makes a decision. I would say with the Gilded Age, it's, a solid hour and you got to pay attention. Because if you don't pay attention, you'll kind of miss it. Like you have to make a commitment to it and it takes time. So have patience. Second is what we were just talking about. You may have some stumbles out of the gate. You may not work perfectly. It may need a fix here and there. You may need to update your UI. You got to deliver the goods. The product market fit, if you will, has to be there eventually. It doesn't have to be perfect right out of the gate, but it has to get to perfect pretty quickly. And then lastly, which is I think they have nailed, is once you get traction, lean in. When I tell you that my socials, everything I see is talking about this show, I see interviews with these guys. I see Mr. Russell in his flower suit all over the internet. By the way, I think it's an interview from 2 years ago that I keep seeing. So recycle all that stuff. But like once you feel that traction gripping, lean in, like repeat, be on everything, repost, retweet. You can take that old content and put it up again, but you have to lean in when you're doing well and really get that momentum, to help you go back to our football references, run downhill, right? And so I think those are the things I'd really, really take. Have patience, nail the product market fit, and then seeing some goodness.
Zooming out to marketing broadly, whether it's at Auctane or in previous stops in your career, what's your marketing strategy when you come into a role as a CMO?
I think one is, customer. I feel like too many times it's really easy to talk about why your product's great and what it does, right? It does this, it does that. But you really have to frame it in what are you doing for me and me being the customer, right? What are the benefits? How am I making things faster, cheaper, better for your end customer, et cetera, with what we're doing, and making sure that you're not just yelling features and functionality at people. And so, I think that comes in a lot of different flavors, whether that's telling customer stories, whether that's showing, not telling. So whether that's demos or webinars or whatever it is. And I also love, particularly if your main message is efficiency or saving money or saving time, how can you demonstrate it? Do you have a calculator? Do you have a cheat sheet? Something where you can really tell those customer stories and those customer benefits. Like, to me, that is always the most interesting and important part. And then all the rest of it follows it, right? Then you can figure out what's your communication strategy, what's your content strategy, what's your acquisition strategy, what's your retention strategy, right? But it all has to flow from that lens of the customer.
One thing that I was just thinking about as it relates to, this is half a B2B marketing takeaway from the Gilded Age and half just thoughts based off what you're saying, is one of the things that they did for this show is the writer took an old book, The Gilded Age, by Mark Twain, and sort of adapted it for modern day, right? And I was just thinking, like, and you talked about sort of like, once you hit traction and, to go do that again, and talking about these like sort of customer stories. And I was just thinking of like how often we do a customer story or testimonial and then we never like reshoot it. You know what I mean? And like get a like 1 year check-in, 2 year check-in. And it's such an obvious lift where you're like, just go back and do that. And you like you never see that.
It's very funny that you say that. No, we never do that. Like check in a year later. Like we may tell a 5-day story on Instagram, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? But you never go back. It's really interesting. By the way, I'm totally doing that now.
We did something on this show today.
Yeah. But my people will be thrilled. And then I think that's right. I will say one thing that's interesting about Auctane that they weren't doing that we are doing now, which is sort of the same vein, but we go to market under a number of different brand names. Yeah. And when I came to the company, every brand had its own little mini marketing department, not acquisition, not like SEM or things like that or podcast buying, but like there was a content person for it. There was an email marketing, there was product marketer we still need. But I was like, guys, all of our brands provide shipping and logistics software. Like, please explain to me what that content person is doing than that content person's doing versus that content's doing. Like, tariffs work the same for all of our brands, right? Yeah. UPS works the same for all of our brands. And it's actually interesting, right? How do you, and I think it's actually an interesting dilemma just in general, which is how do you take the base of something, right? And then, right, we're not going to repost that customer story in a year, right? What you were saying is what's going on with them a year later, or like what new features have they unlocked? What, how are they using it differently? How has their business grown or shrunk or whatever it's doing, expanded? And it's the same thing with marketing, and particularly with content marketing, which is like, hey, you have this base of content, right? And instead of recreating the wheel for every go-to-market brand, or even a year later when you want to give an update on the carriers or whatever, like we don't have to start with a blank page, right? You can, and in some ways there's power in updating, right? Then you have an update, then you can link back to what you talked about a year ago and say, see how things changed. Or you could say, compare these two docs. How have things changed, right? And I think it's a really being cognizant of time, right? Because marketing feels like very, hey, this is what I'm saying to you now, and I may say something totally different to you in 6 months. And I think there's a lot of power in stringing those stories together and telling a cohesive narrative, but then not recreating the wheel every time we're doing something.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned sort of this idea of like utilizing communication forms like articles, audio, video, webinars, all those things. I think one of the things that's hard for people is they're like, do I have to do everything? So number one, do you have to do everything? And number two, should you be doing everything?
I think the answer is yes, and sort of. And what I mean by that is, it's a little bit of you don't want to be everything everywhere all at once, right? Just to keep our movie and TV theme going. But you have to meet people where they are. And so do you need a 5-page article about how to set up your software? No, nobody's going to read that. Nobody wants that. Now, should you have a webinar about that? Absolutely. And if people want to come and you can make it interactive, then that should be there. Should you have video snippets of how to do certain stuff? Yes, definitely. Should you maybe have FAQs, things like that, right? So you have to find the medium that's going to best tell your story. And it's sort of matching the audience, the information you want to get across, and the medium in which you want to tell it, right? So writing an article for Instagram, just to be hyperbolic, would be terrible. I would say, just full disclosure, like Instagram's tough for us. I sell software. It's hard to show pretty pictures of software on Instagram or Pinterest or some of those more visual. So that's where we utilize things like customer stories or maybe a presentation or something like that, right? So you really have to match all of the things, but I do not think you can get along in this day and age with just written content, on a blog or on your website or whatever it is. It's just not going to fly, and you have to meet your customers where they are. And some of them are leaning back and want to see an ad. Some of them, okay, nobody wants to see an ad, but you know what I mean? Get their information through an ad. Some people are active searchers and they're going to want to read articles and reviews and comparisons. And other people want to know how it works. And if it doesn't sound too difficult, great. And if it does, maybe not. So I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate. I find it fortunate because I think it's fun. But, you really have to do everything, but you shouldn't do everything every time for every piece of information you're trying to impart upon a customer, an investor, or whomever.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that it's like, oh, don't try to be everywhere. And I've given that advice over the years for sure. And I think it's kind of wrong though. Because the reason why it's wrong is because it admits sort of defeat of places where your customers are. And it's sort of like, well, you shouldn't really admit defeat. You should probably just reframe the problem to say well, how could we do that? Right. And I think a great example over the years has been Twitter or now X, which is brands just are horrible at it.
Yes.
And when you think about it, you're it makes so much sense, right? Because brands don't have thoughts. So brands can't say anything
that's right.
interesting because they don't think. And so the question, if you take a step back, is not how should our brand be on Twitter? The question is, how do we win on Twitter, right? Or X, or and it's the same thing now with LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn brands could say stuff more effectively, but now that's definitely not true, and it's hard for people to stand out on LinkedIn now. So it's the question needs to be, how do we win channel?
How do you show up authentically in that channel? I think about Reddit a lot in that vein, and I think about Reddit for a couple reasons. One, people are having real conversations about work, right? And so how can we as a brand show up there, be authentic? We are selling something, right? So it's being upfront and honest about that, but also talking about what you do and how you do it and taking the barbs. But you can't show up with some cute advertising thing there, right? It's just not going to fly, and you're not going to win hearts and minds, if you will. And so I think it's tricky. And then just so I can, talk about AI at least once in this podcast, where things like Reddit and even X and other platforms are important for brands is when you go do a search on Perplexity or even a little blurb that comes up on Google from Gemini, those are the places they're going, right? They're trying to pull sort of authentic conversations and other discussions to their search results. And so to the extent that you want to show up as a brand over there, you got to figure out how you show up on Twitter/X and Reddit and other platforms like that, where it's not as natural. I like how you said it, where yes, our brand has a personality, but not like that.
Well, yeah, but yeah, and I think that this is where I think rephrasing the question is the right way to do it, which is how do you win where your customers are? That's the thing. Yep. If they're there, you need to win it.
That's right.
It's not this idea of have a presence. That's not a thing. Have a presence is not winning. Winning is winning, right? So it's how do you win on X? It's maybe you win on X by just buying ads because they're pretty cheap.
Yes.
Maybe you win on Reddit by just buying ads because that's a better way for you to authentically come in. Maybe you win. And the reason why I get some heartburn with this stuff is because I've gotten so many objections over the years about podcasts of and it's just such an easy thing to say. It's someone, a senior executive who's usually not in marketing goes, well, I don't listen to podcasts. Why should our company do those? And I'm like, well, and then you go, well, what do you pay attention to? Like, how do you get your news? How do you get your information? Like, I'm like, do you read articles? Do you read white papers? Like, whatever. And you get to whatever it is that they do. Then you go, well, whoever's selling to you better be doing that.
Right.
And whoever you're buying from or whoever you're selling to, they listen to podcasts.
That's right.
And it's not 100% of them, but if 6% of them do, then 6% of your marketing budget should go to podcasts. Like,
yes.
Right? Like, it's like, that's, I mean, we're being reductive, but it's like, that's, and then it's like with that 6% of your budget, you figure out how the hell do we win this? And it might be making original content, or it might be buying ads, or it might be doing partnered stuff, or you could think of any other which way, but like, you got to figure that out. It's like, if that's where they are, you better figure out a way to win there.
I'll give you my favorite example of this, which is that I don't do that. It's linear television.
Totally.
That still exists.
Yeah.
And guess what? Super cheap to buy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, right.
And as long as you can get an ad made for a reasonable, and is 90% of your audience on linear television anymore? Nope, definitely not. But if you can buy live sports or CNN when there's I'll pick something non-controversial, a high-speed car chase, like, that's great, right? You're going to be there. People are captivated. And I don't buy nearly as much of it as I used to, right? But it is part of a full stack media mix because there is, it's not 1950 anymore where everyone's watching, NBC on, whatever night. And so you need lots of 6% to get your whole audience at the end of the day. And yes, I get a lot of board executives, et cetera, saying exactly that. That's not, that's not where I consume my media. It's like I understand.
Yeah, good point. Let's make sweeping, massive decisions for the future of our business based off of your personal consumption of media. It's like, that makes absolutely no sense.
A lot of the reason why I got into marketing is because marketing changed from being, I don't want to say it's not creative anymore because it's still creative, but from being 80% creative and 20% numbers to sort of the other way around. And it's, it's like, okay, if you want to have a discussion about the aging population on linear and the reach and all of that, that's great. I'm happy to have that conversation. Then I can show you how the numbers pencil out for who we're trying to reach. And that's ultimately always the conversation I want to have, which is, I spend money to acquire or retain customers that has an ROI associated with it. And that is ultimately the goal.
And I think that those are the type of things that like need to have like a rigor to it. And I would say, I agree with you. Like, and I sort of rail against being data driven all the time on the show because they aren't data driven. They're data sort of like, they're like creative ignorant, right? Where you're like, if you were to just use the thing that you said and said, okay, now it's 80% data is more important than 20% creative instead of it used to be the opposite. But the 20% creative also has to be in the 99th percentile of the creative, right? So it's like, it's not that creative is not as important. It's creative is far more important than it used to be. It's just a smaller piece of the mix that you have to make sure you get right. Because if you don't have the data side right, you're really going to F it up. You know what I mean?
That's
and
right.
like that's the thinking that you have to sort of go through. And to the channel piece, it's like people nowadays are very sort of set in their ways of how they consume. So it's like if they watch YouTube, then they only watch YouTube a lot of the time. And like, obviously people are device switching and doing all that sort of stuff. But it's like, if they, you mentioned listening to Bill Simmons' podcast, it's like, that is one of the ways that you consume information. And so it's like, if you are on TikTok, you're probably not watching linear, or you might not be watching linear. And so it's like, by selecting yourself out of a channel, you're actually self-selecting yourself out of a population that's the only way that they get information. And like, that's why it's so important to look at that stuff, is because you're actually just, taking that completely off the table, which could be a bad thing.
100%.
Oh, I think we did some great work there. Laura, yeah, we solved it. Now we just need to spend all the money. Laura, what do we miss? Any other thoughts on marketing or strategy or content, how it all fits together?
I think we hit it. It was a super fun conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Final question here. What is your best piece of advice for a first-time CMO who's trying to figure out how content fits into their strategy?
Know your business and your business goals. I think it's really important to know how your business works, know what drives the economics of the business, whether that's acquisition, retention, upsell, cross-sell, downsell, whatever, and then build your strategy and ultimately your content strategy around that. You can have all the great ideas in the world, but if you're kind of across purposes of what makes the business go, it's not going to work. So I would say that's number one. And then two, sort of at the exact same vein, know your customer, right? What is it that gets your customer to buy, switch, use your products? And, you need to create content that speaks to that throughout their journey, all the way from awareness to, I don't like to say awareness to purchase, because there's so much work to do after purchase. And, there's a lot of stopping after the purchase. So all the way through to kind of that life cycle of a customer.
Amazing. Laura, wonderful having you on our show. For audience, first of all, go to stamps.com. Duh. That's an easy one. Go check out Auctane. You can Auctane.com. Link it up in the show notes. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
That's it. I would just add a little plug for ShipStation.com as well. If you're an e-commerce business and you need some shipping software, we're there for you.
I think I even got a neat, handy little API.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of stuff.
However you want to connect.
And I'm sure you do want to connect a lot of stuff. Laura, well, it's been great connecting with you on the Gilded Age and marketing, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Later. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.